It's baffled scholars for 2 millennia. It is a puzzle made of multi-dimensional elements, an enigma with roots that reach back to the dawning of time, perhaps before. Daniel explained part of it. Ezekiel and Isaiah had glimpses into it. John saw it all for the time of the end. That time is now. Join Derek and Sharon Gilbert on a journey that spans the course of history, from Eden to Mount Hermon, from Hermon to Babel, from Babel to Rome, from Rome to the cross, and from there to us. Biblical prophecy is coming true before your eyes, and to understand it, you must discern the times both then and now. It's time to unravel the threads of this all-encompassing prophetic paradox. It's time to unravel Revelation. Welcome to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are delighted to be recording this program in our barn and closing out the year with the joy of having all of this finished because of you.
Absolutely. We thank you for making this a reality. We have a dedicated space now for producing this program and the other content that we produce, our weekly Bible study, our weekly podcasts. There will be teaching videos and more coming from this facility in the future. We haven't come up with a catchy name for it, so we're just going to stick to calling it The Barn.
It's The Barn to us, so yeah.
But welcome to it, and Merry Christmas to you and to your family.
Merry Christmas indeed. In fact, that is the very topic of this program. This will be our final new program for the whole year, 2023. We'll be back the second week of 2024 with a new program. We'll have some reruns in the meantime. I think Derek's going to pick them out. There'll be good ones. But trust me, you guys are going to relax. We're going to relax a bit too. But yeah, Christmas. I get asked a lot, and I know you do too. Is Christmas really Christian?
That is a really good question. And this connects to Revelation, of course, because in Revelation chapter 12, we read about the great sign that appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she was pregnant, was crying out in birth pains in the agony of giving birth. And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. Of course, that is Satan. We've talked about this previously. Anyway, verse 5, she gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she's been nourished for 1,260 days. Well, clearly that's a prophecy of the birth of Jesus. So John, looking back into the past at the signs that accompanied the birth of Jesus.
Well, I think that's one of the problems when we study prophecy. We all will recognize that prophecy is telling us something in the future.
Yes.
But the idea that a prophet would see not only the future, but also the past?
Right.
Why not?
Yeah. Revelation, as we've said from the very beginning of this program, you can only make sense of Revelation if you go back into the past and begin with the book of Genesis and carry it all the way through. So yes, we're discussing Christmas, but yes, it also connects to prophecy because he is the prophesied Messiah who will return one day and put all things right.
Boy, howdy. Everything in Israel is going to be put right.
But friends of ours several years ago sent a note asking our opinion if they thought it was appropriate to actually send out Christmas greetings to other Christians. And that really bothered me.
Christ Mass.
Yeah.
The birth of Christ, the celebration of Christ.
Right.
That's what this is.
But there are many Christians who in recent years have come to believe that this is a pagan holiday. And really, there are a number of reasons for this. A lot of it can be traced back to one particular source. But I think when we examine I'm convinced that when we examine the historical roots of Christmas, we can say that, yes, while it's definitely true that there are non-biblical traditions that have associated themselves with the holiday, the origin of the holiday had nothing to do with the pagan world. So let's talk about why Christians today find the celebration of Christmas offensive.
I think that's a wonderful topic for now. And by the way, just about everything we do every day has some sort of pagan tradition connected to it somewhere along the line. So picking out the one time of the year that we get to talk about the birth of Jesus Christ, our Savior, let's not avoid it, for
Yeah.
goodness sake.
Throw out the baby with the
Yes, so you've
bathwater.
been researching this for a while.
Yeah, I originally posted something about this to my blog back in 2017, and I've done a little follow-up research on it just to confirm the research that I've done. And this is documented historical research, trying to go with what is historically available and not with, one particular source that we'll discuss during the course of this program. That's the origin of many of these ideas that have attached themselves to the pagan origins of Christmas, which again is not true. First of all, there are many Christians who say that it was originally a holiday of the winter solstice, and on the Julian calendar, which was it's so called because it was brought into being by Julius Caesar in the year 43 BC. The winter solstice actually fell on December 25th of the Julian calendar. However, when you look at the Roman schedule of feasts in the pagan Roman religion of the time of Julius, the winter solstice was not important at all. It was not celebrated.
Now, isn't that interesting?
Right.
Because if you look a lot of the actual stone structures, ancient stone,
Right.
megalithic, they seem to point to either the winter or the summer solstice.
Right. See, but then we begin to conflate the idea that because in the prehistoric era, the solstices were important, therefore it must have been important to the Romans. But when you check the Roman calendar of festivals attached to their religion, winter solstice was not among them.
Now, we can either talk about this at this moment or later on in this episode, but we know that Mike Heiser and others, and he based his opinion on other research that seems to indicate that Christ was actually born in September, what we would call September.
Right.
He was born in Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah, it's on the list of things to discuss.
You're way ahead of me.
Yes,
Carry on.
I've got my outline here.
Follow me.
There are those who believe that Christmas was a Christianized version of the feast of Sol Invictus, which is the unconquered sun. And it is true that we know that for a time, Sol Invictus was celebrated on December 25th. There are others who say that December 25th was the birthday of Nimrod in the ancient world. And
That's new
well,
to a lot of us.
New to a lot of us, yes, but it is an idea that we can trace back to, and I'll talk about this, to Alexander Hislop in his book, The Two Babylons, an 1860 publication, where he did his best, but he didn't have access to all of the archaeological, historical research we have today. The idea, according to this theory, is that Nimrod was the king of Babylon. He was married to Semiramis. He died an untimely death. Semiramis didn't want to give up her job as queen, and so she produced a child. Whether it was Nimrod's unborn child or a child by someone else, we're not sure. But she declared it was a miracle. Therefore, Nimrod was a god. Therefore, her son was a god. Therefore, she was a goddess, and the son was named Tammuz. And of course, we do see a reference to women weeping for Tammuz in the book of Ezekiel, a pagan practice that comes from Mesopotamia, the god called Dumuzi. She declared Nimrod a sun god by most accounts, and according to this theory, the Yule log, which is a tradition that comes out of the Germanic cultures of Europe, is a representation of Nimrod. So the belief is that when we...
How is that?
I don't know.
Well, boy,
I don't know. There's a leap of logic there, but again, Hislop made a bunch of those in his book, The Two Babylons. So the idea was, again, that this was all traced back to Nimrod worship, and so therefore the theory goes, if you're celebrating Christmas, you're actually worshiping Nimrod, who was called Baal. And again, this is another conflation. We'll talk about this in just a minute. Clues in the Bible, this is the other thing that you were alluding to earlier, that clues in the Bible suggest that Jesus was born either in the spring or in the fall, because the shepherds were in the fields with their flocks, which would not have been true in the month of December. So again, as Dr. Michael Heiser pointed out, and he based his presentation on the work of Dr. Ernest L. Martin, who wrote a book called The Star of Bethlehem, the Star That Astonished the World. And he pointed to the clues in Revelation chapter 12, the astronomical clues of the woman clothed in the sun with the moon at her feet and the 12 stars. He pointed to the year 3 BC because the king star, Jupiter, the king of the pantheon, passed through the constellation Virgo, representing Astarte or Ishtar or Inanna, the Virgin. And then there was a conjunction in September of that year with the star Regulus, which is the brightest star in the constellation Leo, the king star, Regulus, Rex, king.
Leo.
In Leo, right. The Lion of Judah. And this is what the wise men were looking at when they figured out this is what this means. The date when that conjunction, thank you, I knew it was a con word, conjunction took place was September 11th of 3 BC, September 11th, interestingly enough. So that was the most likely date, we think, following the work of Dr. E.L. Martin, for the actual birth of Jesus. So there are those who say that because December 25th is the wrong day, we are making God angry by celebrating on the wrong date.
That also is Rosh Hashanah. I remember Mike Heiser talking about that, which is very interesting because I think that's the date that Adam was supposed to have been created.
Right.
Well, the second Adam, the perfect Adam, Jesus Christ, being born on the same day. I love that.
Yeah.
That's symmetry.
It is, and God does that a lot.
No, but I don't think that we're making God angry if we get the date wrong, because nowhere in the Bible is the date actually given, nor are we commanded to celebrate the date.
Exactly. And we'll talk about how the early church settled on December 25th, why they got to that date. It's an interesting process that is not correct. They got the wrong dates involved, but their intentions were good.
Yeah.
The other objection we find is in Jeremiah chapter 10. When you take a particular verse from Jeremiah 10 out of context, it appears to condemn the decoration of trees. Jeremiah 10, verse 3, a tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of a craftsman. They decorate it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammer and nails so that it cannot move. Their idols are like scarecrows in a cucumber field, and they cannot speak. They have to be carried, for they cannot walk. Again, out of context.
Yeah, this isn't a Christmas tree.
It is not a Christmas tree. Jeremiah 10 is a polemic against the fashioning of idols, which in the ancient world, in the ancient Near East, the culture of Jeremiah, Isaiah, the prophets, the apostles, the idol was not the object of worship. It just gave locality to the deity that you were worshiping.
Like
so unless, like a supernatural radio receiver to bring the deity into a place where you could actually communicate with it.
And they covered them with gold. And with silver, they decorated them. They would put lapis lazuli for eyes sometimes.
Right.
They would be beautifully worked.
Yeah.
But, sorry, that is not really your God.
Right.
Your deity is Yahweh.
Exactly right. So that's what Jeremiah was saying. Don't fashion an idol for any other god, for thou shalt have no other gods before me. That was the point. Unless you are creating an idol and worshiping the idol or worshiping a deity that inhabits your Christmas tree, it's just decoration. That's all it is. Also in Galatians 4, verses 10 and 11, Paul writing to the church of Galatia, or the Galatian church, you observe days and months and seasons and years. I am afraid I may have labored over you in vain. This is taken again out of context and used to say you shouldn't celebrate the day because God forbids it. But in the context of the letter to the Galatians, what Paul was condemning were those who had been convinced by Judaizers that they needed to go back under the law and celebrate all of the calendar of feasts that God had decreed to Moses. Now that we were no longer under the law, Paul wrote, you're free from this, but now you're going back to this. Stop it. That was the point. It wasn't that the Galatians were observing holy days. It's that they were convinced they had to do so to be saved.
Oh.
That salvation depended on following those feasts and festivals.
Oh, yeah.
So the questions we need to ask, and then we'll come back after the break with the answers to these questions. I think there are 3 questions that we need to ask when it comes to determining whether we as Christians should or are free to, let's put it that way, whether we are free to celebrate Christmas. First of all, is Christmas based on the worship of pagan gods? When did the early church begin to celebrate Christmas? Because that helps us determine when the practice came into being and where it was in the timeline of history relative to pagan worship. Yep. And why did they settle on December 25th for the holiday? And we will answer those questions when Unraveling Revelation continues. For December, we're offering every DVD in our online store for just $10. That's right, $10 for any DVD in our store. That includes collections of our teachings like This is War and Unmasking the Ancient Gods, The Four Horsemen, where we identify the fallen angels who ride in Revelation chapter 6, our travelogumentaries of our trips to Israel, Wars of the Gods Volume 1, Search for the Titans, and Wars of the Gods Volume 2, Search for the Rephaim, What Lies Beneath, a jaw-dropping discussion with Dr. Aaron Judkins about the influence of the fallen watchers on Göbekli Tepe, the Best of Sci Friday Volumes 1 and 2, and the 13-part video teaching series based on the book The Second Coming of Saturn. We'll even include The Unseen Adversary, an MP3 CD with 7 hours of audio interviews with Bible scholar Dr. Michael S. Heiser. Every DVD in our store, just $10 plus shipping and handling during December, only at gilberthouse.org/store. Welcome back to Unraveling Revelation. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are so glad that you're joining us, especially for this, because I think this discussion of the legitimacy of Christmastide in the Christian church, we all need to have it, but you and I have a Christmas tree in our house.
We do.
And I take pictures of it all the time because we have a dog named Grace that loves to be on that couch with the Christmas tree in the background. She has her own Facebook page, Grace the Rescue Dog. And we named her Grace because she was rescued.
By love.
Love rescued her. Love rescues us. And that is grace.
Yep.
God's redemption at Christ's expense.
Amen. Amen. So, but there are aspects of Christmas that we do not celebrate. We don't have Santa Claus on display in the house.
No, I'm just not into that. And I know that if you do that at home because you've got little kids, look, we're not going to condemn you for that. I don't think the Lord does, as long as you're not worshiping Santa Claus.
Yes. Now, there is a teaching opportunity there because St. Nicholas was a real historic character who
slept.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was well, it's a long story, but anyway, there was a bishop named Arius who was preaching a heresy, and St. Nicholas at a council of the church leaders basically went right up to Arius and smacked him across the face for his teaching. Now, I'm sure he did it in Christian love. Not recommended the way to respond to others. Social media, it's a little too easy to start slapping. But,
it is. But I love St. Nicholas, the real St. Nicholas.
The real St. Nicholas,
so
right.
That's your teaching opportunity.
So, question number 1, is Christmas based on pagan worship? The answer very simply is no. The winter solstice, yes, it fell on December 25th during the time of Julius Caesar, but again, there was no religious significance to the winter solstice until the time of the Emperor Aurelian in the late 3rd century AD. So almost 300 years after Julius Caesar, they finally began celebrating stuff on the winter solstice. So again, no connection to the winter solstice at all.
That's a long time.
Long time. 300 years ago,
Our country hasn't even been around for 300 years.
Right. Saturnalia. This was the most popular festival in the Roman calendar, but Saturnalia was celebrated between December 17th and December 24th. Now, this was a time of festivity when social norms were kind of overturned. Slaves could say and do whatever they wanted. They were no longer bound to their masters. It was a time of celebration. But given the type of god that Saturn was, and Saturn was known to the Romans to be the equivalent of the Greek god Kronos and the Phoenician god Baal Haman, the most well-known feature of Saturn, what he was best known for, was demanding child sacrifice. I mean, in my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, I showed that this is the entity that the Hebrews called Molech. So it is not likely that early Christians who were coming out of the pagan religions of Greece, Rome, Phoenicia, the Levant, Egypt, it's not likely they would have gone back into a religion or tried to Christianize a celebration of a god whose best known characteristic was demanding the slaughter of children. It's just not likely. Nimrod, is this the worship of Nimrod? No. We've been studying Nimrod and digging into what scholars actually know about this character for years now, and it is safe to say that there is no evidence that Nimrod was ever worshipped in the ancient world by any culture at any time anywhere. Period. Full stop. End of story. Nimrod was not worshipped as a deity by anyone.
First of all, his name wasn't even Nimrod.
Well,
that was a polemic.
It was a polemic from the Hebrews, right? There are different theories as to who he was. I've written that he may have been the Sumerian king named Enmerkar. Most recently, our friend Dr. Doug Petrovich just wrote a book about Nimrod where he argues that he was Sargon the Great, the ruler of Akkad, the one who established the Akkadian Empire. Now, the notion that Nimrod was worshipped comes right from Alexander Hislop in that book, The Two Babylons, published in 1860. He meant well again, but he was wrong. He lived in the wrong millennium to be associated with Semiramis, Nimrod did. So whether he was Sargon or Enmerkar, it doesn't matter. He still lived more than 1,000 years before the historical Semiramis. She was an Assyrian queen, ruled Assyria around 800 BC. That's in the vicinity of Ahab and Jezebel, somewhere in that ballpark. Her name was Semu Ramat, but again, it was not, since they were not even in the same millennium, forget about them having children. But again, the bottom line is neither of them worshipped. That
really would have been a miracle.
It would have been, yes. Neither of them worshipped by anyone at any time, anywhere. Sol Invictus, again, the Emperor Aurelian comes into the picture here. He made the worship of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, the law in the Roman Empire in the year 274 AD. But we know that for at least 50 years thereafter, because of a collection of writings of inscriptions called Inscriptiones Latinae Selectae, that during the reign of the Emperor Licinius, who ruled the Eastern Roman Empire during the early reign of Constantine the Great, the Feast of Sol Invictus was on November 18th. It wasn't even in December.
So Thanksgiving. No, we're not going there.
No. The first date we can document that the Feast of Sol Invictus took place on December 25th was in the year 8354. So no earlier than 8354. Now, question number 2. When did Christians begin to celebrate Christmas? The earliest record is from an early church father named Clement of Alexandria. That's northern Egypt. He said that there were Christians who had begun celebrating the birth of Jesus in the late 2nd century AD. But it wasn't on December 25th. He said some thought it was on May 20th. Others thought it was April 19th or 20th. Clement also wrote that other Christians were in the custom of celebrating his Epiphany on January 6th, which is important because it became customary in many places to celebrate Christ's Epiphany and his birth at the same time. And the Armenian church to this day still celebrates Christmas on January 6th, not December 25th.
Right. Epiphany, that's when the wise men showed up.
The wise men showed up and they recognized his divinity. The earliest record of celebrating Christmas on December 25th is a document called the Chronography of 354 AD, but they date it to about 336 AD. So 20 years before Sol Invictus was moved to December 25th, we know that there were Christians celebrating the birth date of Christ on December 25th. So it's more likely that Julian the Apostate, who was the Roman emperor, because he went back to the pagan worship of Rome, he probably moved the Feast of Sol Invictus from November 18th to December 25th to try to hijack Christmas instead of Christmas being a hijacking of Sol Invictus.
Oh, that's entirely different.
Yes. So anyway, now how did they settle on the date? There was a group of early Christians called the Donatists who emerged around the site of Carthage, that's modern-day Tunisia, in the early 4th century during the Diocletian persecution, just before Constantine came to power. So between 305 and 312 AD.
Okay. They
celebrated Christmas on December 25th. Okay. So, or at least it is believed that they did. We know for sure that by 336, there were Christians celebrating on December 25th. Why did they settle on that date? In the words of the song, tradition. Seriously, Jewish tradition. There was a Jewish tradition that famous Jewish prophets were conceived on the same date and the year in which they were conceived, or they died on the same day, at the date of their conception.
Died,
same date, right. So in the early 3rd century, the early church father Tertullian believed that the date of Jesus' death was March 25th, in the year 29 AD. Now, this was totally wrong because in 29 AD, March 25th was not on a Friday. It was not Passover Eve. Passover was not on a Friday at all in the year 29, and it didn't fall in the month of March. But
29
still,
AD makes no sense whatsoever.
That's right. It's more likely April 7th of 30 or April 3rd of 33. That's what scholars have concluded. Either one of those two.
Say that again?
Either AD 30 or AD 33 on either April 7th or April 3rd. His death, right. The crucifixion would have taken place on one of those 2 days. That's the consensus of modern scholars.
Gotcha.
Anyway, bottom line is early church trying to figure out the death date of Jesus and thus figure out the date of his conception settled on March 25th. They were wrong, but that's where we are. And when you get to, March 25th as a conception date, add 9 months. And there you are, December 25th.
It may seem like, well, why couldn't they figure it out? Because the way time has been counted and kept track of changes so much through history. And at the time that Jesus was born, the method for counting the months was based on the lunar year. Therefore, 360 days in the year. Then the Romans came along and everything changed there. And then everything changed after the Romans. And then the Gregorian calendar came in. So it is difficult for us to know when anything in certain periods of history actually happened. Right.
And again, this is all based on trying to figure out when the Passover was, which would have been on the 14th of Nisan on the Jewish calendar. Oddly enough, in the East, the Greek Christians figured that it had to be in the same month as the spring equinox, and so they put it on April 6th, which is how they get the January 6th birth date, which again is still celebrated by the Armenian Church. In the West, they settled on March 25th, hence December 25th.
Yeah. Well, let's not forget the woman, the sign of the woman. That occurred, according to Mike Heiser and others, in 3 BC.
3 BC.
On September 11.
Right.
What we would call September 11, Rosh Hashanah, 3 BC. So if that happened, then 30 AD makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Because he wouldn't have begun his ministry, we believe, until he was 30 years old.
And then
he had a
3-year ministry. Right. So that would likely be the date. And if I'm not mistaken, that was the date that was pointed to by Sir Robert Anderson.
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
Wonderful books you need to read by
The Coming Prince by Sir Robert Anderson. You can find it online. It's in public domain. Basically showing how the prophet Daniel nailed Jesus' triumphal entry in Jerusalem to the date. We've done that talked about that in a previous program. But bottom line here, I think Paul put it best in his letter to the Romans, Romans 14, beginning of verse 5. One person esteems one day as better than another, while another esteems all days alike. Each one should be fully convinced in his own mind. The one who observes the day observes it in honor of the Lord. The one who eats in honor of the Lord, since he gives thanks to God. While the one who abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. The bottom line is, however the Holy Spirit leads you is correct. But the bottom line is that we are free to celebrate the birth of Jesus at this season. And we pray that you have a blessed time with your family, a blessed Christmas season, and we look forward to seeing you again in the new year.
Merry Christmas to everyone. Have a glorious, glorious time with your family, and have a blessed new year.
Unraveling Revelation is a viewer-supported outreach of Gilbert House Ministries. Follow us online at unravelingrevelation.tv and gilberthouse.org.